What if the person you trusted most, your so-called best friend, suddenly became the biggest threat to your carefully built reputation? Imagine climbing your way from obscurity into the most powerful, glittering circles in the world, only to discover that the very person who helped you get there holds the keys to your downfall. This isn't just a story about friendship. It's a story about secrets. Dangerous, career-shattering secrets. And at the center of it all sits Meghan Markle and her one-time confidant, Jessica Mulroney. From red carpets to private whispers, their relationship once seemed unshakable. Jessica was Meghan's rock in Toronto, her stylist, her guide, her insider to elite circles. She was even called Meghan's best friend forever. But then came betrayal. Then came silence. Then came Tom Bower, the royal biographer whose reputation for exposing raw, uncomfortable truths has left more than a few in Buckingham Palace squirming. His revelations didn't just stir old gossip. They reignited a feud, one rooted in something darker than public disagreements or social media scandals. According to whispers and claims, Meghan didn't just drop Jessica because of a public controversy. No, the real reason was far more dangerous. Jessica knew too much. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. So let me ask you, what could possibly be so devastating, so unthinkable, that Meghan Markle, the woman who maneuvered her way into the royal family, would risk cutting off her closest friend? Was it a story about love? Betrayal? A past boyfriend who could unravel everything? Stay with me, because the answers don't just change how you see Meghan. They rewrite the entire story of her rise to royalty. Picture Meghan before the palaces, before the designer gowns, before the global interviews. She was a woman on the edge of Hollywood, auditioning, waiting tables, hustling for bit parts. The life of a dreamer who wanted more. She found her way to Toronto, where she landed her breakout role on Suits. It was there, amid the glamorous but tight-knit social scene, that she met Jessica Mulroney. Stylish, well-connected, married into Canadian wealth, Jessica wasn't just another friend. She was a ladder. Meghan climbed fast, using Jessica's influence to navigate galas, events, and connections. It looked like friendship. But was it friendship or strategy? Think about it. Jessica dressed her, advised her, pushed her into the right rooms. Meghan became more polished, more royal-ready. And when Prince Harry entered the picture, Jessica was right there, central to Meghan's reinvention. At the royal wedding, Jessica's children walked down the aisle. The cameras flashed, capturing not just a union of prince and actress, but the crowning moment of Jessica's influence. She was in every shot. She was part of the inner circle. But here's the twist. What the cameras didn't capture was the vault of knowledge Jessica carried. She had been with Meghan through the messy years. She knew the boyfriends, the arguments, the struggles, the contradictions. And somewhere in those years lies the story of betrayal, one Meghan couldn't risk the world finding out. According to claims, it wasn't just Meghan's family that Jessica had insight into. It wasn't just career missteps or failed auditions. It was something more personal. Something that tied Meghan's past relationships, her ambition, and her carefully constructed image into a single fragile thread. Now, let's be real for a moment. People don't just throw away a best friend overnight. Especially not someone who stood at your side during the biggest day of your life. Meghan and Jessica had every reason to stay close. But instead, what did we see? Silence. A sudden distance. Meghan cut her off. Why? The official story says Meghan was distancing herself after Jessica's public scandal, when Jessica clashed online with an influencer and was accused of racial insensitivity. Meghan, who was reinventing herself as a global voice for equality, had no choice, right? That's what the headlines claimed. But Tom Bower tells a different story. He suggests that Meghan was already on the verge of severing ties long before the scandal hit. That Meghan was terrified Jessica could expose parts of her past that she had worked tirelessly to bury. And this is where the betrayal theme becomes sharp. Because betrayal isn't always about one big, explosive event. Sometimes, betrayal is about power. Jessica allegedly had power over Meghan, not just as a stylist, not just as a friend, but as a keeper of dangerous knowledge. Knowledge Meghan couldn't afford to let out. And when power shifts, friendship dies. So here's the haunting question. What exactly did Jessica know? Was it about Meghan's previous boyfriends? The ones the media barely talks about? Was it about a relationship Meghan betrayed in her climb to the top? Or was it about her family, her father Thomas Markle, her half-siblings, her early years that didn't fit the perfect royal narrative? Every possibility is more explosive than the last. And if Jessica ever spoke, Meghan's carefully built image as the modern, progressive Duchess could have cracked wide open. But why bring this up now? Because Tom Bower's words keep this story alive. He's painted Meghan as a strategist, a woman who uses people until they're no longer useful, then discards them. It's a pattern he traces through her career, her friendships, even her romances. And in Jessica's case, the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a friend. This was someone who could dismantle the brand Meghan had become. And that's what makes this story so urgent today. Every time Meghan and Harry step into the spotlight, whether at award shows, interviews, or documentaries, the absence of Jessica Mulroney is glaring. Once inseparable, now erased. That silence is deafening. What happened between them isn't just old gossip. It's the missing chapter of Meghan's transformation. Now ask yourself this. If you were in Meghan's position, would you risk it? Would you keep a friend close, knowing they might one day use your past against you? Or would you cut them off cold, even if it meant looking like a betrayer yourself? That's the dilemma Meghan faced. A choice between loyalty and survival. And her decision left Jessica not just abandoned, but allegedly holding a secret that could detonate everything. But here's where the tension builds. Meghan may have thought cutting ties would end the danger. That without access, Jessica would fade away. Yet silence can be louder than any confession. Every unanswered question fuels more speculation. Every absence from Meghan's life becomes proof of a deeper rift. And every revelation from biographers like Tom Bower pulls back the curtain just a little more. So when you hear the words, Meghan betrayed her boyfriend, or Jessica knew too much, don't think of it as simple drama. Think of it as chess. Meghan was playing to protect her king, her crown, her legacy. Jessica was holding on to pawns Meghan couldn't risk losing. The game was brutal, and one wrong move could have ended it all. And yet, here we are, years later, still asking, what did Jessica really know? What truth did Meghan fear most? Because if Bower is right, the betrayal wasn't about Jessica's scandal. It wasn't about political correctness. It was about secrets, ambition, and survival. Meghan's survival. But what if I told you that Jessica wasn't just a bystander? That she might have actively reminded Meghan of what she held, even hinted at the danger of crossing her? Imagine the tension in those final conversations, the unspoken threats, the forced smiles. Meghan realizing she couldn't control the narrative unless she erased Jessica entirely. And that, my friends, brings us to the real cliffhanger. Because if Jessica truly does hold Meghan's most dangerous secrets, the story isn't over. Not by a long shot. Silence today doesn't guarantee silence tomorrow. And when a friendship dies with this much baggage, there's always the chance that one day, someone decides to talk. But what could Jessica reveal that would shatter Meghan's carefully built royal image? Was it about love, betrayal, or something even darker? That's exactly where we're headed next. What drives someone to chase fame so relentlessly that they risk everything else in their life? For Meghan Markle, the answer was simple. She wanted more than ordinary. She wanted to matter, to be seen, to rise above the confines of her beginnings in Los Angeles, in a world where doors often remained closed to those without connections, privilege, or the right surname. But Meghan's journey to Hollywood wasn't glamorous. It was a grind, a series of auditions, rejections, and networking attempts that would have tested the patience of anyone with less ambition. Imagine her at 20, navigating the Los Angeles scene. Small roles in commercials, unpaid internships, side jobs to pay the rent. Every day was a negotiation with reality. Could she make it in an industry built on appearances, timing, and the whispers of people in power? Meghan knew she had talent, but talent alone wouldn't cut it. Hollywood demanded strategy. It demanded alliances. It demanded knowing which doors to knock on, and more importantly, which doors to push open with persuasion and charm. Her move to Toronto was a turning point. The Canadian city wasn't Hollywood, but it had the network Meghan needed. It was here she found Suits, the show that would catapult her into the public eye. But before Suits could even audition her, Meghan had to navigate social circles that were as closed off as any casting office. Enter Jessica Mulroney. Jessica wasn't just anyone. She was a well-connected stylist, deeply enmeshed in Toronto's elite social scene, married into wealth and influence. Jessica had the keys to rooms Meghan had only dreamt of entering, and Meghan, who understood the power of strategic friendships, quickly aligned herself with Jessica. They became inseparable, or at least that's how it appeared. From glamorous brunches to charity galas, Jessica pulled Meghan into spaces where influence and connections were everything. Meghan absorbed it all, taking notes, watching interactions, understanding the unspoken rules of privilege and access. It was an education in power, in social navigation, in positioning oneself for opportunities that could change a life. And it worked. Meghan's star was rising. But this wasn't just about career. There was a personal side too. For Meghan, Hollywood wasn't just a dream. It was a proving ground. Could she command attention without being crushed by criticism? Could she be herself in a world that demanded perfection, polish, and marketable charm? Each small role she landed, each social introduction she earned, became a stepping stone toward visibility, but it also exposed her vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities that Jessica noticed. Friendships, after all, are rarely neutral. Jessica's observations weren't just kind gestures, they were data points. She saw Meghan's anxieties, her ambitions, her relational missteps. She knew the boyfriends Meghan dated, the rumors swirling around early Hollywood attempts, and the personal choices Meghan thought were private. In short, Jessica held knowledge that could either empower Meghan or, if misused, destroy her. At this point, the story of ambition and strategy intersects with risk. Meghan was ascending, but every ascent carries exposure. Every choice, every friendship, every secret is a potential liability. Jessica, who could make introductions, also had the power to reveal private truths. And Meghan, ever aware of image and perception, understood that Hollywood's spotlight could be merciless if personal missteps were aired publicly. Now consider the stakes. Meghan had a boyfriend during this period, a man whose identity remained largely under wraps in public discussions, but the details of that relationship were complicated. She was ambitious, but she also sought companionship, perhaps naive to the fact that personal relationships can be weapons in a world obsessed with image. Jessica, by virtue of proximity and observation, became privy to intimate knowledge about Meghan's romantic life. The kind of knowledge that could be devastating if leveraged or leaked. It was a balancing act. Meghan had to cultivate connections, secure her career, and protect her image, all while navigating complex personal relationships that had the potential to interfere with her ambitions. She learned early that Hollywood is unforgiving. One misstep, one betrayal, one secret revealed can erase years of work. And Jessica's role in all of this was both supportive and potentially threatening. As Meghan's profile grew through suits, so did her awareness of power dynamics. She wasn't just acting, she was managing a brand. Every public appearance, every interview, every social outing was calculated, consciously or subconsciously, to enhance her narrative. The stakes were higher than ever. And in that environment, friends like Jessica weren't just companions. They were part of the architecture of ambition itself. Allies could lift you up, but knowledge could also topple you. At the same time, Meghan's ambition wasn't only professional. She was learning about her own capacity for influence, charm, and strategy. Hollywood demanded that she think several moves ahead. Every smile, every conversation, every stylistic choice had repercussions. She wasn't just playing a role on screen. She was playing a role in her own life's trajectory, carefully scripting her image for maximum impact. But Hollywood is unpredictable. Despite talent, despite networking, despite the right connections, success isn't guaranteed. And with the increased visibility came scrutiny. People were watching her choices, analyzing her friendships, questioning her motives. The very friends who lifted her up, like Jessica, also had the potential to expose her missteps. Secrets from earlier relationships, private ambitions, personal contradictions, all of it was ammunition. And Meghan knew it. And that is where the tension began. The story of ambition, talent, and opportunity was entwined with fear. Fear of exposure, fear of betrayal, fear that one wrong move could unravel the carefully crafted persona she was building. Every decision Meghan made had consequences, not just for her career, but for the very narrative of her life. Her Hollywood ambitions were just the beginning. They laid the foundation for everything that followed: the friendships, the betrayals, the strategic distancing, and ultimately, the royal ascent. Without understanding this early chapter, it's impossible to grasp why Meghan acted the way she did with Jessica, or why secrets held by a friend could be perceived as existential threats. But what Meghan may not have realized at the time was that ambition always comes with a price. The higher she climbed, the more precarious her position became. And when your friends hold pieces of your past that could be weaponized, every relationship becomes a potential liability. Jessica Mulroney wasn't just a friend. She was a gatekeeper to secrets that Meghan couldn't risk leaking. And Meghan's awareness of that power would eventually lead to one of the most consequential decisions of her life: cutting off someone who had been central to her rise. And here's the cliffhanger. Meghan's Hollywood ambitions didn't just shape her career. They set the stage for personal and public betrayals that would follow her across continents and into the royal family. Every choice, every friendship, every secret was a move in a high-stakes game. But what happened when one friend knew too much? That's the question that would eventually define Meghan Markle's path. And it's the question we'll unravel next. What happens when ambition collides with intimacy? When the pursuit of fame and power intersects with the private chambers of the heart, the result is often chaos. For Meghan Markle, this collision came early, long before royal weddings or global headlines, in the form of a boyfriend who would become central to whispers, rumors, and ultimately, scandal. Imagine the scenario: a young actress on the brink of her breakout role, juggling auditions, networking events, and a budding relationship. Hollywood demands attention, but love demands vulnerability. Meghan's boyfriend, whose name remains largely private, was someone she trusted, someone she allowed into the private corners of her life. But in a world where perception is everything, even the most personal connections are scrutinized. The details of the relationship are hazy, but what's critical is how it became entwined with Meghan's ambitions. The boyfriend wasn't just a companion. He represented a link to her past, a reminder of a life before suits, before glittering premieres and celebrity status. In other words, he held pieces of Meghan's story she might have preferred to leave untold. And someone close to her, Jessica Mulroney, was aware of these pieces. Jessica, by all accounts, was privy to intimate details of Meghan's romantic life. She had observed interactions, overheard stories, and perhaps even had access to conversations that Meghan considered private. In an ordinary friendship, that's not unusual. In Meghan's case, where every public perception is managed and every image curated, it became a potential threat. A whisper at the wrong time could spiral into headlines that might undo years of careful brand building. Consider the stakes. Meghan was on a trajectory that demanded flawless public perception. Suits was gaining traction, her media presence was expanding, and her personal brand, intelligent, poised, relatable yet glamorous, was being meticulously crafted. Any revelation about a past relationship that contradicted this carefully constructed image could have devastating consequences. And Jessica, as a trusted friend, was uniquely positioned to know, and perhaps even reveal, these contradictions. Now, think about what it means for Meghan to betray a boyfriend during this time. Allegations suggest that, in her pursuit of career advancement, Meghan may have prioritized ambition over loyalty. It's a morally complex situation. She was navigating personal growth, professional opportunity, and social ascent, all while under the watchful eyes of peers who might exploit any misstep. Betrayal, in this context, isn't simply a romantic failing. It's a tactical move in the larger game of survival. And that's the tension. Meghan's rise demanded strategic choices. Her relationship was a factor that could either anchor her emotionally or threaten her professionally. The alleged betrayal, then, may have been less about cruelty and more about self-preservation. It's an uncomfortable truth that ambition often forces people to make choices that conflict with their moral compass, particularly in an industry that values image over authenticity. Enter Jessica Mulroney. Jessica's role in this narrative is pivotal because she held knowledge that extended beyond mere gossip. She understood the timeline, the emotional stakes, and the potential fallout of any disclosure. In essence, she possessed leverage Meghan may have found frightening. For someone like Meghan, who was learning the delicate balance between privacy and public perception, this leverage was dangerous. The dynamics of the friendship began to shift subtly. Where once there was camaraderie and mutual support, a sense of unease began to creep in. Meghan, acutely aware of Jessica's knowledge, may have started distancing herself, not overtly, but in ways that allowed her to protect her growing image. Conversations became measured. Smiles were polite but cautious. Trust, once freely given, now carried a cost. Now, let's explore the boyfriend angle further. If Meghan's relationship history became public, the media could frame it in countless ways, as evidence of opportunism, manipulation, or moral failing. In Hollywood, narrative is king. One story, one leaked detail, could overshadow years of carefully managed appearances. Jessica, as a friend who knew more than most, was both ally and potential risk. And for Meghan, the fear of exposure may have outweighed the loyalty of friendship. Direct question to the audience. Would you cut off someone who had helped you rise, simply because they held truths that could hurt you? It's a question that strikes at the heart of human behavior, loyalty, and ambition. Meghan faced this dilemma not as a hypothetical exercise, but as a daily reality. Every interaction with Jessica became a negotiation. How much to share, how much to withhold, how to maintain control over her narrative while navigating the complex landscape of friendship and personal history. Emotional spikes surface here: fear, guilt, strategic calculation. Meghan's betrayal of her boyfriend, if it occurred, was not merely a romantic misstep. It was intertwined with her larger ambitions and her need to manage public perception. The stakes were magnified because Jessica knew. Every secret shared, every past indiscretion observed, was a potential headline waiting to happen. And the irony is sharp. Jessica had been a mentor, a friend, a key ally in Meghan's rise. The very person who had helped her navigate early social and career opportunities was now a keeper of secrets that could undo everything. Friendship, ambition, secrecy, they intersected in a way that is as old as human society, but here, magnified by celebrity, media scrutiny, and the looming possibility of royal life. Yet there's another layer: the personal versus the professional. Meghan's decisions weren't solely about career or public image. They were about self-preservation, psychological safety, and control over her own story. Every step she took to distance herself from Jessica, every measured response to potential exposure, was part of a larger strategy to maintain autonomy in a world that constantly tried to define her. And this sets the stage for what comes next. Betrayal, secrecy, and fear of exposure were no longer theoretical. They were lived realities. The friendship that had propelled Meghan's career forward was now fraught with tension, shadowed by unspoken threats and the power of knowledge. And as we'll see in the coming chapters, the choices Meghan made during this period would ripple forward, influencing relationships, public perception, and ultimately her path into the royal family. Here's the cliffhanger. Jessica Mulroney, once Meghan's closest ally, wasn't just a friend who knew too much. She was a friend whose knowledge could define Meghan's legacy. And the question remained: would Meghan's ambition protect her, or would it isolate her in a way that no career success could remedy? What transforms a friend into an adversary? At what point does loyalty erode under the weight of secrets, ambition, and fear? For Meghan Markle and Jessica Mulroney, the answer lies in a combination of timing, knowledge, and the delicate calculus of personal and public life. What began as an alliance built on trust, shared goals, and mutual elevation slowly mutated into tension, suspicion, and ultimately estrangement. Jessica Mulroney wasn't just a stylist or a friend in Meghan's life. She was a gatekeeper. She had influence, connections, and access to social circles that Meghan coveted. In Toronto, Jessica opened doors to high-profile events, media opportunities, and elite networking possibilities. To the casual observer, Jessica was a mentor, a confidant, even a sister-in-arms helping Meghan navigate the labyrinth of fame. Their friendship seemed enviable, symbiotic, and, above all, unbreakable. Yet appearances can be deceiving. Friendships, particularly those entwined with ambition and public visibility, carry undercurrents of risk. Jessica knew Meghan's past intimately: boyfriends, career missteps, family dynamics, and personal vulnerabilities that Meghan may have assumed were safe within the walls of trust. Knowledge, in this context, was double-edged. It allowed Jessica to guide, support, and advise Meghan, but it also gave her a form of leverage, whether intentional or not. Consider the power dynamics at play. Meghan's star was rising. Suits had given her visibility, but Jessica's network and guidance amplified her presence beyond the screen. Their joint appearances at charity events, social functions, and industry galas reinforced the narrative of an inseparable duo, an image that worked for both of them. But with visibility comes scrutiny. Every smile, every gesture, every private conversation was subject to interpretation, potential misrepresentation, and, in the wrong hands, scandal. This is where the seeds of tension took root. As Meghan's public profile grew, so did the stakes. Her image became increasingly curated, increasingly vulnerable to disruption. Jessica, with her intimate knowledge of Meghan's history, became both a protector and a potential threat. The very person who had elevated Meghan could also, inadvertently or deliberately, destabilize her. For someone as strategically minded as Meghan, this duality was a source of anxiety. The friendship began to shift subtly. What were once casual conversations turned into careful negotiations. Shared experiences became opportunities to gauge trustworthiness. Jessica's influence, once comforting, now carried weight that Meghan could not fully control. And in a world where image and narrative are everything, control is paramount. One misstep could transform the most intimate friendship into a weaponized liability. Direct question to the audience. Have you ever felt that someone close to you knows just enough about your past to threaten your future? Imagine that tension magnified by celebrity status, media scrutiny, and the high stakes of international attention. That was Meghan's reality. Meanwhile, Jessica's own ambitions and social positioning added complexity. She wasn't just a friend. She had a public persona, a career, and a reputation to maintain. Her interactions with Meghan were not purely altruistic. They also reinforced her visibility and relevance. In many ways, Jessica's role in Meghan's life was symbiotic. Each elevated the other. But when symbiosis turns into dependency, tension is inevitable. One misaligned motive, one perceived threat, one fear of exposure can rupture even the strongest alliances. The turning point, according to reports and sources cited by Tom Bauer, was not a single event, but a gradual accumulation of incidents where Meghan began to perceive Jessica's knowledge as dangerous. Allegedly, Jessica was aware of details from Meghan's past relationships, including the boyfriend scandal discussed previously, and had the capacity, real or imagined, to reveal them. For Meghan, whose future was increasingly tied to public perception, this was intolerable. Emotional stakes escalated. The friendship, once a source of empowerment and guidance, now carried anxiety, suspicion, and a subtle undercurrent of threat. Trust, which had been freely given, now required constant evaluation. Every interaction was measured. Every disclosure was filtered, and every silence was interpreted, sometimes catastrophically, as potential betrayal. This dynamic created a psychological tension unique to high-profile relationships, the duality of reliance and fear. Meghan relied on Jessica for support, guidance, and access, but she also feared the consequences of that reliance, recognizing that the very information that strengthened their bond could be turned against her, intentionally or not. The fear of exposure, amplified by ambition and media scrutiny, transformed the friendship from allyship into cautious alliance. At the same time, Jessica may have sensed the shift. Once the conduit for Meghan's rise, she may have perceived distance, hesitation, and guardedness. What she interpreted as caution could have been Meghan's strategic maneuvering. And yet, without clear communication, a hallmark of celebrity relationships shaped by PR, media, and public expectations, the rift widened. Misunderstandings flourished in the shadows, and small tensions escalated into perceived betrayals. The public narrative, of course, simplified everything. Headlines about Instagram controversies, tone-deaf social media posts, and charity missteps painted Jessica in a negative light, making it appear that Meghan's distancing was a reactive measure to a friend's public mistakes. But insiders and biographers suggest a more complex reality. Meghan's distancing was preemptive, strategic, and informed by a fear that Jessica's intimate knowledge could threaten her emerging royal image. This is where emotional irony becomes stark. Jessica, who had been instrumental in Meghan's rise, became the very figure representing risk. The person who had offered guidance, support, and social elevation transformed, in Meghan's perception, into a potential liability. Loyalty, once unquestioned, now carried the risk of exposure. Friendship, once a source of strength, now demanded negotiation and calculation. And so, what was once an alliance became a delicate balance of proximity and distance. Meghan maintained appearances publicly but redefined boundaries privately. Jessica remained influential, yet increasingly peripheral. The symmetry that had defined their relationship fractured under the weight of secrecy, ambition, and fear. The stakes were not hypothetical. This wasn't a disagreement over a party invitation or a minor social slight. The secrets Jessica possessed about relationships, family, and personal history could, if revealed, alter Meghan's public narrative, her career trajectory, and ultimately her path into royalty. And Meghan, recognizing this risk, made decisions that would have profound consequences for both women. Here's the cliffhanger. The friendship that had elevated Meghan to stardom was now a potential threat to her future. One misstep, one revelation, one leak could undo everything. Jessica Mulroney, once her closest ally, had become a shadow looming over Meghan's ambitions, a shadow that Meghan would soon feel compelled to remove from her path. What do you do when someone you trusted knows the parts of your life you never wanted anyone to see? For Meghan Markle, the question became terrifyingly real. Jessica Mulroney didn't just witness Meghan's rise. She held keys to the chapters of Meghan's past that could unravel the carefully curated narrative of the Duchess-to-be. And in a world where image is currency, those keys were more than knowledge, they were power. Let's rewind a little. Before Meghan captivated global audiences, before she walked down the aisle to a prince, she lived a life full of complexities, mistakes, and private choices. Hollywood was a proving ground, yes, but it also exposed her to relationships, friendships, and personal decisions she hoped would remain under wraps. Every boyfriend, every public misstep, every interpersonal conflict had the potential to become a headline. And Jessica was present for much of it. She wasn't merely a bystander. She was someone Meghan had confided in, someone who had guided her through the treacherous waters of ambition, fame, and social positioning. The secrets Jessica allegedly held ranged from personal relationships to career vulnerabilities. Consider the boyfriends from Meghan's pre-suits life, the romances that weren't publicized, the entanglements that could be spun negatively if exposed. Some insiders suggest that one relationship, in particular, was a sticking point, a story with enough narrative weight to threaten Meghan's public image if framed incorrectly. But it wasn't just romance. Jessica reportedly knew intimate details about Meghan's family dynamics. Thomas Markle, Meghan's father, had a complicated relationship with her. Her half-siblings and estranged relatives added layers of tension. The media had already portrayed Meghan's family in fragmented ways, but Jessica's knowledge could have contextualized, confirmed, or even expanded those narratives, potentially amplifying controversy. Here's the key. It's not that Jessica necessarily intended to harm Meghan. It's that her knowledge existed independently of Meghan's control. In the high-stakes world Meghan was entering, mere awareness of these details by someone who could speak or leak posed a risk. Every conversation, every casual remark, every story from the past was ammunition. Meghan, as someone who meticulously managed her public persona, could not ignore the threat. Think about the psychology here. When someone holds your secrets, even someone you trust implicitly, your behavior shifts. You self-censor. You evaluate every disclosure. You begin to calculate outcomes. If this conversation happens, what might be revealed? If that piece of information surfaces, how will it be interpreted? Meghan's public life, her career, her future, everything was contingent upon managing perception. And Jessica's knowledge was a variable Meghan couldn't fully control. Let's also consider timing. By the time Meghan's Hollywood career was taking off, her interactions with Jessica had grown deeper and more intertwined. Jessica's guidance extended beyond fashion and social introductions. She advised on networking, image management, and career positioning. She was a gatekeeper of opportunities. But with access comes insight. And insight, in Meghan's eyes, transformed into risk. Direct question to the audience. If someone you trusted knew every mistake, every intimate choice, every potentially damaging story about you, could you continue the friendship without fear? Could you remain open, or would self-preservation demand distance? This is the dilemma Meghan faced, magnified exponentially by fame and future royal prospects. The emotional stakes here are immense. Meghan's ambition was intertwined with her desire to protect her image, her future, and her family's reputation. Loyalty to friends collided with the need for strategic self-protection. Each memory, each secret, became a point of tension, and the very person who had been an ally in building her career now represented a vulnerability she could not afford to ignore. Moreover, Meghan's awareness of Jessica's knowledge likely influenced her early decisions regarding distancing. The friendship's fracture wasn't only a result of a public Instagram scandal or minor disagreements. It was preemptive. Meghan reportedly recognized that the deeper the friendship persisted, the greater the risk of exposure. It wasn't just about maintaining appearances, it was about survival in a world where perception equals power. The stakes extend further when considering the public eye. Every move Meghan made was under scrutiny, from red carpet appearances to interviews, to casual social media posts. Any inconsistency, any past detail revealed, could be exploited. Jessica's knowledge was not a static element. It was dynamic, potentially explosive, and completely outside Meghan's direct control. Here's the irony. The same person who had once been instrumental in protecting and guiding Meghan was now perceived as a threat. Loyalty and trust, once pillars of their friendship, became liabilities. Meghan's efforts to ascend, professionally, socially, and ultimately royally, required her to reassess relationships that might compromise her narrative. And for Jessica, whose knowledge could never be erased, this created an unbridgeable gap. And this is where the emotional tension deepens. Meghan wasn't just dealing with secrets. She was dealing with the existential risk those secrets posed. Every interaction with Jessica was shadowed by what-ifs. What if a story leaked? What if details were misrepresented? What if a single past misstep was framed to undermine her credibility? The pressure was relentless, and the consequences potentially irreversible. So, Meghan made a strategic, emotionally charged choice. She began to distance herself, not in anger, not in impulsivity, but in calculated self-preservation. The friendship that had been foundational was now redefined by risk. Every moment spent together was evaluated for potential fallout. And in a world where media amplification is instantaneous, any lapse could have global repercussions. The cliffhanger: Jessica's knowledge wasn't just a threat to Meghan's career. It was a threat to the very story she wanted the world to believe about herself. And when ambition, fear, and strategy converge, friendships that were once unshakable can crumble in silence. Meghan's move to distance herself wasn't just a personal decision. It was a tactical maneuver in a high-stakes game of narrative control, one that would echo through her later royal life. What happens when a woman who has already navigated Hollywood's treacherous waters enters an entirely new arena, one even more scrutinized, more public, and more perilous? For Meghan Markle, meeting Prince Harry wasn't just a personal milestone. It was the beginning of a transformation that would magnify every previous fear, secret, and strategic calculation. Her life shifted from managing celebrity status to negotiating the unforgiving landscape of royalty, where image, loyalty, and perception are paramount. Imagine the scene: Meghan at a charity event in London, poised, confident, and aware that her life could change with a single encounter. Prince Harry, a prince known for both his charm and his rebellious streak, notices her. That chance meeting sparks a relationship that quickly becomes global news. Suddenly, every choice Meghan makes, clothing, behavior, interviews, social media posts, carries international weight. The stakes are astronomical, and any misstep could have lifelong consequences. Enter Jessica Mulroney. Though Meghan's public attention shifted overseas, Jessica remained a significant influence behind the scenes. Her expertise in style, etiquette, and social navigation became even more valuable. She advised Meghan on appearances, introductions, and even social media strategy, tools Meghan needed to transition from Hollywood actress to future royal. Jessica's knowledge of Meghan's past also became a form of insurance. In high-pressure, highly visible environments, knowing which parts of her story could be exposed and how to manage them was crucial. But with transformation comes tension. As Meghan's profile soared, so did the scrutiny. Every rumor from Hollywood, every relationship detail, every whispered scandal suddenly had the potential to become global news. Jessica, who had once been an ally in crafting Meghan's image, now represented a variable Meghan could not entirely control. The stakes were no longer confined to career or personal reputation. They extended to the monarchy itself. Any revelation could spark media frenzy, social controversy, and internal royal conflicts. Direct question to the audience. If someone close to you knows the past you've worked so hard to move beyond, how do you navigate that relationship when the world is watching? For Meghan, the answer involved strategic distance, calculated interactions, and meticulous image management. She needed allies she could trust implicitly, but trust, in this environment, was a scarce commodity. As the wedding concluded, the public narrative was one of celebration. Meghan had achieved what many could only dream of. She had navigated Hollywood, social circles, and royal protocols to arrive at this moment. Jessica, too, was celebrated as a supportive friend. But privately, the relationship dynamics were shifting. Allegedly, Meghan had already begun to distance herself from Jessica in subtle ways, recognizing that proximity to someone with intimate knowledge of her past was increasingly dangerous. The fallout from the wedding extended beyond emotional or personal considerations. It introduced a heightened level of scrutiny. Media outlets dissected every interaction, analyzing body language, commentary, and photographs. Any perceived tension between Meghan and Jessica was magnified in speculation. The friendship that had once been a cornerstone of Meghan's support network became a topic of public conjecture. Every slight misstep, every rumor, every whispered conversation had the potential to explode into scandal. Emotional stakes were high. For Meghan, the wedding was simultaneously a triumph and a tightrope walk. She had to manage her emerging role within the royal family, maintain relationships with those who had helped her ascend, and preemptively mitigate any threats to her image. Jessica, who had been instrumental in guiding Meghan's early life and career, now represented a variable Meghan could not fully control. Loyalty and history conflicted with necessity and self-preservation. Let's consider the psychological landscape. Meghan's awareness of Jessica's knowledge likely influenced behavior during and after the wedding. What seemed like minor distance, subtle hesitations, or calculated smiles may have been strategic, designed to manage risk while maintaining appearances. In essence, Meghan had to navigate a dual reality, a public display of friendship and a private awareness of potential vulnerability. The irony is sharp. Jessica, whose guidance had been pivotal in Meghan's rise, was now simultaneously an ally and a latent threat. The friendship that had been a source of strength became a source of stress, anxiety, and strategic calculation. Meghan's actions were not reactive but preemptive, aimed at securing her position, protecting her narrative, and mitigating exposure of any damaging information. Public speculation grew. Observers noted subtle changes in behavior, perceived distance, and occasional tension in photographs. Headlines hinted at friction, and social media amplified these observations. But insiders suggested a deeper, more calculated reason for Meghan's distancing: the potential threat posed by Jessica's knowledge of her past, particularly romantic history, family dynamics, and career vulnerabilities. Here's where the stakes escalate. The wedding, a pinnacle of personal achievement, had inadvertently highlighted the fragility of relationships built in environments where ambition, secrecy, and trust intersect. Meghan's triumph was public, but the private calculus, fear, strategy, and concern over Jessica's knowledge was equally, if not more, consequential. The cliffhanger, as the post-wedding celebrations faded and Meghan entered the formal world of royalty, she was acutely aware that the same person who had helped craft her image, Jessica Mulroney, was now someone whose knowledge could threaten everything. The friendship that had once propelled her to prominence was becoming a liability she could not ignore. And what Meghan chose to do next would not only redefine that friendship, but also set the stage for future public scrutiny, media speculation, and personal conflict. In the age of social media, a single post can ignite controversy that spreads faster than wildfire. For Meghan Markle and Jessica Mulroney, this reality became painfully clear during what the public widely refers to as the Instagram scandal, a moment that appeared minor to outsiders but carried massive implications behind the scenes. It was here, more than ever, that the complexities of friendship, ambition, and secrecy collided in ways that would define their fractured relationship. Picture it: a well-meaning post meant to express solidarity, perhaps intended as support, yet misinterpreted or amplified in the public eye. Jessica Mulroney, deeply entwined with Meghan's journey, made a post that many deemed tone-deaf or misaligned with the broader social climate. Social media erupted. Headlines splashed across screens. Jessica Mulroney under fire. Friendship tested. Royal ally controversy. The world watched, judged, and speculated. From the public's perspective, Meghan's response, or lack thereof, was scrutinized just as intensely. Did she support her friend? Did she silently distance herself? Every pause, every comment, or silence was interpreted as signaling loyalty, judgment, or disapproval. In reality, Meghan's silence wasn't just about the post itself, it was about control. It was about managing perception while simultaneously navigating the latent threat posed by the knowledge Jessica held about her past. Direct question to the audience: if someone close to you publicly missteps, and you know secrets they could reveal about you, what would you do? Every decision carries risk. Meghan's response, or strategic silence, was a calculated maneuver. She had to weigh loyalty against the potential fallout of exposure. She had to anticipate how the media, the public, and the royal family would interpret every subtle action. The scandal also shed light on an uncomfortable reality. The friendship that had propelled Meghan's ascent was now a potential liability. Jessica's visibility, knowledge, and connections could, at any moment, collide with Meghan's public image in destructive ways. The Instagram post became a catalyst, not the root cause, of the growing distance between them. It crystallized Meghan's fears. Proximity to someone who held secrets was no longer safe. Consider the emotional tension here. Meghan had to navigate gratitude for Jessica's past support, loyalty to a friend, and the imperative of self-preservation. It's a psychological tightrope. On one side, the desire to honor a friendship that had been instrumental in her rise. On the other, the necessity to protect her narrative, her relationships, and her emerging identity as a member of the royal family. Every interaction, every word, and every gesture was weighed against these competing priorities. Moreover, the Instagram scandal amplified scrutiny of both women. Media outlets and social commentators dissected their relationship, speculating on rifts and conflicts. Every headline, every tweet, every story became a magnifying glass, examining both public behavior and private dynamics. For Meghan, the stakes extended beyond personal image. They threatened to destabilize the carefully curated narrative she had worked tirelessly to craft. Jessica's role became even more complex in this environment. She had been a mentor, guide, and confidant. Yet the same visibility that elevated her also amplified the potential consequences of her actions. Her knowledge of Meghan's past, once a form of shared trust, now loomed as a latent risk. Meghan's strategic distancing, already in motion, intensified. What had once been casual moments of collaboration and camaraderie were replaced by calculated interactions, subtle boundaries, and careful curation of appearances. The irony is stark. Jessica, who had been central to Meghan's rise, was now simultaneously an ally and a perceived threat. Loyalty was no longer straightforward. Trust carried inherent risk. Meghan's efforts to manage the fallout of the Instagram scandal were therefore informed not just by public optics, but by a deeper, private calculus, ensuring that past secrets, relationships, or vulnerabilities did not surface at a time when her visibility and the stakes were at their highest. As the scandal played out in public, the private reality remained even more charged. Meghan's awareness of Jessica's knowledge of her past intensified the perceived need for distance. Every post, every public interaction, every subtle gesture of engagement had to be measured against the potential for exposure. In essence, the Instagram controversy served as both a symptom and a catalyst. It exposed tensions already present and accelerated a separation that had been forming in the shadows. And yet, the public narrative oversimplified everything. Headlines framed Meghan's distancing as reactive, as if her actions were solely a response to Jessica's misstep. But insiders and biographers suggest otherwise. Meghan's decisions were proactive, preemptive maneuvers informed by fear, strategy, and the awareness of the latent threat posed by someone who knew too much. The Instagram scandal merely provided a convenient public explanation for an underlying, far more complex dynamic. The emotional and strategic stakes escalated further. Meghan had to navigate a world where every decision was amplified, every misstep visible, and every secret potentially lethal to her public image. Jessica, despite her intentions, represented a variable Meghan could not fully control. Friendship, once a source of strength and guidance, had become a minefield, demanding vigilance, calculation, and sometimes painful distance. Here's the cliffhanger. The Instagram scandal was just one episode in a broader narrative of trust, betrayal, and secrecy. Meghan's careful maneuvers, designed to protect herself, would soon intersect with revelations, leaks, and the pressures of global scrutiny in ways that no social media post alone could explain. And the question lingered. What was Jessica capable of revealing, intentionally or unintentionally, about Meghan's past? That's the story we continue to unravel next. The world of celebrity and royalty is built on image, narrative, and perception. One person who has long understood this dynamic and exploited it with surgical precision is Tom Bower, the renowned royal biographer whose work has exposed uncomfortable truths about figures across the monarchy. For Meghan Markle, Bower's involvement marked a turning point. His revelations didn't just stir gossip. They pierced the carefully curated veneer of friendships, secrets, and ambition, shining a light on what had been quietly festering behind the public spectacle. Imagine being Meghan in this moment. You've navigated Hollywood, cultivated relationships, and ascended to the royal spotlight, only to realize that someone outside your inner circle has knowledge of your past and the audacity to publish it. Bower's claims weren't casual conjecture. They were detailed, researched, and framed to resonate with both the public and media outlets hungry for scandal. According to his reporting, Meghan's distancing from Jessica Mulroney wasn't merely a reaction to social media controversy. It was a preemptive move to protect her image from the secrets Jessica held. Bower paints a picture of a relationship defined by power, knowledge, and fear. Jessica, he suggests, knew intimate details about Meghan's past, relationships, career missteps, and personal decisions that could, if revealed, destabilize her carefully constructed public persona. Meghan, ever strategic, recognized this risk. The friendship that had once propelled her into elite social circles had transformed into a latent threat. Every conversation, every interaction with Jessica was a negotiation between trust and self-preservation. Consider the implications. For Meghan, Bower's revelations validate the internal calculus she had been conducting for years. The Instagram scandal, the wedding tensions, the subtle distancing. All of it was part of a broader strategy to mitigate risk. By framing Jessica as a potential liability, Meghan acted not out of malice, but out of necessity. Her actions were guided by an acute awareness that in a world where perception is reality, knowledge is power, and the wrong knowledge in the wrong hands can be devastating. Direct question to the audience. If someone close to you holds secrets that could ruin you, would you confront them, distance yourself, or take steps to control the narrative before it's too late? Meghan chose the path of calculated distance. The friendship, no matter how historically significant, had to be managed against the backdrop of risk and potential exposure. Bower also highlights the psychological dimension. Meghan's awareness of Jessica's knowledge was not passive, it actively shaped her decisions. Every public appearance, every interview, and every social interaction was filtered through the lens of, what can Jessica reveal? This constant calculation added tension to a relationship that had once been a source of support and guidance. What was once a friendship had become a strategic relationship defined by risk management. The stakes were not theoretical. In the celebrity and royal spheres, exposure of past relationships or personal vulnerabilities can have material consequences. Career opportunities, public perception, and personal credibility are all influenced by narrative. Jessica's knowledge, Bower suggests, was a form of latent leverage, power Meghan could not ignore. Her preemptive distancing, therefore, was both a protective measure and a tactical maneuver to control information flow. Emotionally, this creates a complicated landscape. Meghan's gratitude toward Jessica for her past support conflicted with fear of exposure. Loyalty collided with self-preservation. Every interaction was layered with nuance. Public smiles masked private caution. polite conversations concealed strategic boundaries, and friendship itself was redefined under the weight of knowledge and ambition. Here's the paradox. The same friend who had facilitated Meghan's rise, offering guidance, connections, and style advice, was now perceived as a threat. Bauer's reporting underscores this duality, emphasizing how ambition and secrecy intersect to redefine relationships. In high-stakes environments, allies can become liabilities, and friendships can be sacrificed not out of malice but out of necessity. The public narrative, of course, is far simpler. Headlines framed Meghan's distancing as reactive, a response to Jessica's social media missteps. But insiders and biographers, including Bauer, suggest a far more nuanced reality. Meghan's actions were strategic, preemptive, and informed by the recognition that the person she once trusted most could jeopardize everything she had built. This insight also reframes our understanding of Meghan's psychological landscape. The fear of exposure, the constant management of relationships, and the anticipation of potential leaks created a heightened sense of vigilance. Meghan's every decision, from public appearances to private interactions, was influenced by this awareness. Friendship, loyalty, and trust were all measured against the potential consequences of knowledge in the wrong hands. And here's the cliffhanger. Bauer's leaks don't just illuminate past tensions. They hint at even deeper, more consequential revelations. If Jessica held secrets capable of destabilizing Meghan's public image, what else remains undisclosed? What truths, fears, and personal calculations shaped Meghan's choices beyond the public eye? The answers are layered, complex, and potentially explosive, an uncharted chapter in the intersection of ambition, secrecy, and friendship. Imagine living a life where every detail of your past, every personal decision, and every intimate relationship could, at any moment, be broadcast to the world. For Meghan Markle, that was her reality, and Jessica Mulroney's knowledge of her history amplified the stakes to a level few could comprehend. The friendship that had once been a source of empowerment had transformed into a potential vulnerability, a latent threat that demanded careful management, strategic distancing, and constant vigilance. By the time Meghan entered the royal spotlight, the pressure to maintain a flawless public image was absolute. Every interview, public appearance, and media interaction was meticulously curated. Behind this polished exterior, however, lay a network of relationships and secrets capable of destabilizing her narrative in an instant. Jessica Mulroney, privy to intimate details about Meghan's past, was central to this equation. Her awareness of past relationships, personal missteps, and familial complexities made her both invaluable and potentially dangerous. Consider the psychological burden. Meghan's every move had to be calculated not just for public perception, but for private security. Each interaction with Jessica was measured. How much to share, how much to withhold, what tone to adopt. Meghan's silence on certain topics wasn't avoidance. It was strategy. It was about mitigating the risk of exposure while navigating the delicate balance of loyalty, gratitude, and self-preservation. Direct question to the audience. If someone you trusted could reveal your most damaging secrets, would you confront them, negotiate with them, or distance yourself entirely? Meghan's approach was a combination of all three: distancing to reduce risk, strategic engagement to maintain appearances, and psychological preparation for the possibility that secrets might surface regardless of her precautions. The threat of exposure wasn't hypothetical. It existed in the form of rumors, gossip, and media speculation that could exploit every detail Jessica knew. One misinterpreted conversation, one leaked anecdote, or one misaligned social media post could have resulted in a scandal far beyond ordinary comprehension. For Meghan, the stakes were global. Career, reputation, family dynamics, and the emerging royal identity all hung in the balance. Jessica's position as a friend and confidant made the threat uniquely potent. Unlike random acquaintances or the general media, Jessica had intimate knowledge of Meghan's choices, relationships, and vulnerabilities. This knowledge was not abstract, it was actionable. The possibility of exposure influenced Meghan's behavior in subtle but powerful ways, shaping her decisions, her interactions, and her public messaging. Emotional stakes intensified as Meghan navigated this landscape. The friendship that had once provided guidance, support, and companionship now generated anxiety, tension, and strategic calculation. Trust became conditional, loyalty was reassessed, and every engagement carried the implicit question, how much can I reveal without jeopardizing myself? Every meeting, every conversation, every smile required evaluation against potential risk. The irony is profound. Jessica, who had been central to Meghan's rise, facilitating connections, offering mentorship, and providing guidance, now embodied the very risk Meghan had sought to mitigate. Loyalty and assistance were inseparable from the threat of disclosure. The friendship's value was measured not just in support and history, but in its potential to either protect or harm Meghan's carefully constructed public identity. The social and media environment exacerbated these pressures. Headlines, speculation, and public curiosity constantly amplified the stakes. Observers scrutinized Meghan's behavior toward Jessica, looking for signs of tension or discord. Every pause, every measured response, every subtle distance was interpreted as evidence of conflict, further complicating the narrative. Meghan's personal choices were no longer private. They were subject to public analysis, judgment, and conjecture.